A Werewolf Shifter Romance audiobook written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. 10 years earlier. The lie smelled sweet. For Luna Anya, that was the most jarring detail. Lies were supposed to be sour, sharp with deceit. But this lie, the one coiling into her home tonight, smelled of night-blooming jasmine and honeyed wine, a scent that promised peace, while hiding a blade in its heart. Her den. It felt tight tonight, the air thick with unspoken things. Usually it was a sanctuary of warm stone, the comforting scent of pine from her mate's skin, but not tonight. Across the hearth, her husband, Alpha, laughed, a deep and honest rumble. He was trying to teach their daughter, 10-year-old Selah, how to whittle a small bird from a piece of fallen birch. "Not like that, my little wolf," Taryn chuckled, adjusting Selah's small hands over the wood. "You'll take a finger off. Let the knife do the work." Selah giggled, a sound like wind chimes, her bright, clever eyes focused in concentration. "But it won't go where I want it to, Papa." Her voice was clear, confident, a voice Anya cherished. Their guest, seated opposite her, smiled. "She has your eyes, Anya. Her spirit is all Taryn's." Alpha Marcus of the Meadow Crest Pack lifted his goblet. His face was handsome, his words as smooth as the polished river stones he was known for. He was their friend, their ally. He had brought the gift, a rare, sweet-smelling incense meant to cleanse the air for diplomacy. It was still burning in a brass dish on the mantel, its perfume cloying, overwhelming. "We are grateful you came, Marcus," Taryn said, setting the whittling aside. "This alliance with the Silver Moon Pack, it's necessary. Their old ways are not our ways, but strength must be met with strength, not fear." "Precisely," Marcus agreed, his gaze glittering, "which is why your trust is so vital, and so misplaced." The shift was instantaneous, the warmth in the room gone. Taryn's head cocked, his alpha senses flared, but it was too late. His movements were sluggish, confused. He tried to stand. Anya was on her feet, a snarl tearing from her throat. "Marcus!" He didn't flinch. He simply watched, his friendly mask melting away to reveal something cold. Reptilian. "The old blood is too strong in them, Anya. And in you. You seek balance when you should be seeking dominance. Your vision is a weakness this world cannot afford." Taryn staggered, his hand going to his chest. "The incense. You—" Fear. Cold and absolute, it seized Anya. She looked at Selah, whose bright eyes were now wide with terror. This wasn't a political move. This was an extermination. "Selah!" Anya's voice was a low, urgent command that cut through the haze. "The cubby. Behind the tapestry. Go. Now!" Her daughter, ever obedient, scrambled from her father's side. "And you do not make a sound. Do you understand me? Not a single sound," whispered. "Your life depends on your silence." Selah nodded, her small face pale, and vanished behind the heavy woven fabric, just as the den doors burst open. Not pack guards, rogues, two hulking beasts, their eyes vacant, their maws dripping. Behind them stood one of Marcus's own men. The lie had a face. It was the face of a friend. Anya shifted, her bones cracked, reforming into the lithe, powerful form of her wolf. She met the first rogue with a fury born of desperation. Her only thought, buy her daughter seconds. She heard Taryn fall, a heavy, final sound. It shattered her soul. Through the haze of battle, she saw Marcus calmly pour a vial of oil along the base of the great wooden bookshelves. He struck a flint. A line of fire roared to life with unnatural speed. It was over. She knew it. Pinned. The second rogue's teeth sank into her shoulder. Fire. So much fire. Her last act was not defiance. It was love. She forced her wolf's head to stay down, her gaze fixed on the tapestry. She did not look at her daughter's hiding place. She would not give her away. Her last conscious thought was a silent, desperate prayer sent into the darkness. A prayer for a little girl, told that her life depended on her silence. The poultice was a thick, dark paste, and it smelled of the earth, of bloodroot and calendula. Selah's fingers, stained almost black, worked with a practiced gentleness that defied the tremor deep in her soul. Her patient, a young wolf barely a year into his first shift, had tangled with a territorial badger. From there, things had only gotten worse. The gashes on his flank were deep, angry red canyons in his brown fur. He whimpered, a low, sad sound that vibrated through the wooden plank of the healing den. Selah's world was a small one, built of scents and textures. She felt safe here, in the quiet space she had carved out for herself, mostly because the sharp, clean scent of herbs was strong enough to mask her own. A ghost shouldn't have a scent. A ghost shouldn't have a name. Still, they called her Selah. Her touch was her only voice. It had to be. With every heartbeat, she smoothed the paste over the raw wound, her movements a silent prayer for skin to knit and pain to cease. The young wolf's mother, a tense she-wolf named Lyra, watched from the corner. Her eyes were filled with a painful mix of gratitude and pity. Selah never met her gaze. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't bear the pity. She was a healer, a sister, a ghost. She didn't need their sorrow. To make things worse, Elder Maeve stood by the doorway, her arms crossed, her lips a thin, tight line. "He will scar badly," Maeve announced, her voice as brittle as autumn leaves. She didn't look at the patient. She looked at Selah. "But I suppose that's better than the alternative. You do have a touch for broken things, child." The words, meant as a compliment, landed like stones. Broken things. Selah's hands did not falter, but a familiar cold weight settled deep in her chest. Her own scars, the silver web that decorated her throat, tingled in sympathy. A memory of fire, of pain. A memory she could never quite grasp. Deep down, she knew the truth. They didn't see a healer. They saw a reflection of their own fears, a living reminder that the world held horrors that could steal a person's voice and leave them incomplete. Maybe it was fate that she was good with her hands, because they were the only part of her that was allowed to speak. Before she could move, a new scent cut through the herbs, pine and sharp, familiar worry. Her brother. His shadow fell across the floor, and just like that, her small, quiet world was about to get much, much louder. Moments later, Liam was kneeling beside her, his large frame making the healing den feel impossibly small. He ignored the elders, his focus entirely on her. "Selah," he murmured, his voice a low rumble meant only for her. Alpha Marcus just made the announcement. Selah's hand stilled on the young wolf's flank. She didn't need to look at Liam to feel the tension rolling off him. It was a scent she knew as well as her own, worry laced with a helpless anger that had simmered for 10 long years. She carefully wiped her hands on a clean cloth. Then she turned to face him. Her hands began to move, shaping the air into words. "What announcement?" "The mating hunt," he said, his jaw tight. "With the Silver Moon Pack, to solidify the alliance. He's forcing it." A cold dread trickled down her spine. The Silver Moon Pack. They weren't just rivals. They were monsters from campfire stories. Primal, barbaric, a pack that still followed the old brutal ways. Her hands trembled as she signed, "It is for the good of the pack, for peace." "Peace?" Liam scoffed, running a hand through his dark hair. "There's no peace with them, Selah, only dominance. They're alpha," whispered. "They say he's more beast than man, that he took the pack by force before he was even fully grown. They say he rules through fear." He leaned closer. "What's worse, everyone of age is expected to attend, everyone." Her breath caught. No. The word was a silent scream in her mind. A gathering, a crowd, the press of bodies and the weight of their stares. It was her worst nightmare. She felt the walls of the den closing in. Because of that, she had to get out. She stood up, needing air, but Liam's hand gently caught her arm. "I won't let him make you go," he promised, his voice fierce. but they both knew it was an empty promise. An alpha's decree was law. She was a member of the pack, even if she was a broken one. She placed her hand over his, her touch a silent plea for him to stop, to not make this harder than it already was. But deep down, she knew the truth. He wasn't just worried about the pack or the politics or the savage alpha. He was worried about her, his silent, broken sister, his burden. She didn't know what scared her more. The idea of facing a pack of savages, or the suffocating weight of her brother's love. As if fate demanded it, her fingers drifted to the scarred skin of her throat, a place that hadn't made a sound in a decade. That night, the great hall thrummed with a nervous energy. The air was thick with the scent of pine from the torches and the heavier smell of werewolf anxiety. Selah stood beside Liam, trying her best to look small, to fade into the rich tapestry that depicted the history of the Sunstone Pack. She kept her eyes down, focused on the weave, on anything but the faces around her. And then, Alpha Marcus took the center of the hall. He was everything an alpha should be. Tall, handsome, with a voice as smooth and warm as honey. When he smiled, the pack smiled with him. He spoke of unity, of strength, of the necessity of their alliance with Silvermoon. He painted a picture of a future where their two packs, progressive and primal, could create a new era of power. It was a beautiful speech, inspiring. So why did every instinct in my body scream at me to run? She watched him, truly watched him, past the handsome face and the reassuring words, and she saw it. A stillness in his eyes, a watchfulness, the same unsettling calm she'd seen in a hawk just before it dives for the kill. Her thoughts spun. No one else seemed to notice. They were captivated, hanging on his every word. But she felt it, clear as day. A deep, primal wrongness. Why? Why does he feel more dangerous than the monsters in the stories? Without warning, as Marcus spoke of cleansing old wounds with the fire of new alliances, it happened. The word fire collided with the scent of the pine torch beside her, and just like that, everything changed. Her world tilted. Fire, roaring, so much heat, a scream trapped in my throat. And a smell, something sweet, too sweet. The vision was a dizzying flash, a phantom pain lancing through her scarred throat. Her breath caught. She stumbled, grabbing Liam's arm for support, because the world had suddenly decided to spin off its axis. He steadied her, his face a mask of concern, but she couldn't hear what he was saying. The echo of that phantom scream was too loud in her ears. In that moment, she looked back at Alpha Marcus. He had paused, his gaze sweeping the room. For the span of a breath, his eyes met hers. There was no warmth in them, no concern, only a flicker of something that looked like annoyance. As if her small, silent disturbance had ruined a perfect performance. The hunt was tomorrow, and for the first time in 10 years, as the echo faded and the fear settled back into her bones, she felt it, a flicker of something else, something hot and sharp, a flicker of rage. The rage was a foreign thing, a hot coal lodged in her chest where only cold dread had lived for 10 long years. But then, the great horn blew, signaling the start of the hunt, and the heat was swallowed by a tidal wave of ice. The clearing, a sea of bodies, a churning ocean of scents, pine and musk from the Silvermoon wolves, earthy loam and river stone from her own Sunstone pack. It was too much, too loud, too bright. Her body moved on instinct, trying to shrink, to fold into the shadows at the edge of the firelight. Liam stayed close, a solid wall of worried muscle at her side. Still, she felt the stares. They were like physical things, little pinpricks against her skin. The broken one, the silent Luna's daughter. She could hear the thoughts even if they weren't spoken. Because of that, her hands clenched into fists. Without warning, chaos. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a fight. It was fire. A wall of unnatural, hungry flame exploded from the western edge of the clearing, roaring through the dry brush with a sound like a starving beast. Panic, a scent sharp and sour. Wolves shouted, people scattered. The perfect order of the hunt shattered into a million pieces of terror. In that moment, she was separated from Liam. A surge of bodies, a wall of panic. He was gone. She was alone, lost in the smoke and screams. To make things worse, a new figure emerged from the billowing black clouds. A massive wolf, not of her pack, its eyes glowing with a feral, mindless light. A rogue. Its lips were pulled back in a snarl, teeth like daggers. She felt it, clear as day. Death had come for her again. Her feet were rooted to the spot, her throat tight with a scream she couldn't make. The beast lunged, and just like that, everything changed. Between one breath and the next, a second shape slammed into the rogue, a blur of silver and shadow. It was bigger, more powerful, a living embodiment of primal fury. The sound of the impact, a wet, violent crunch, echoed in the sudden quiet of her mind. Her world narrowed to the sight of this new protector, this massive wolf who dispatched the rogue with terrifying efficiency before turning its own glowing golden eyes on her. Time stood still. As the beast shifted, bones cracked, reformed. A man stood where it had been, tall, broad, radiating a power that made the very air tremble. The moment their eyes locked, her soul answered a question she'd never known it asked. His gaze was a physical touch, a brand against her skin. He took a step forward, then another. With his scent in the air, pine and winter and something wilder, he stopped just before her. His response was a low, rumbling growl. A promise. A claim. Mine. Her name hung in the air, unspoken. Yet the single word from the strange alpha's lips seemed to claim every part of her. Mine. The word was a chain, wrapping around her soul. As the silence stretched, the pack alphas converged, their faces grim masks in the flickering firelight. Her own alpha, Marcus, stood opposite the terrifying stranger. The Silver Moon Alpha, she realized with a jolt of terror. Corbin. The monster from Liam's stories. Corbin's eyes never left her. A look of raw, untamed possession. It should have terrified her. Deep down, it did. But something else was there, too. A strange, humming warmth that started in her chest and spread through her veins. As the bond pulsed, a forgotten part of her stirred. Alpha Corbin, Marcus began, his voice like honey poured over steel. This is unprecedented. She is of my pack. Corbin's response was a low growl that rose in his throat. He did not look at Marcus. He looked only at her. She is my mate. The moon goddess has made her choice on this night of all nights. Or are you questioning the will of the goddess, Marcus? The challenge was clear. A blade laid bare between them. What could Marcus say? No alpha could deny a true mating claim made before two packs without inviting a war. That's why the situation was so impossible. Truth be told, a small, treacherous part of her wanted Corbin to win. It was a terrifying thought. Why? Why would I want to go with this savage, this beast of a man? Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was the way Marcus looked at her now. Not with concern, but with the cool, calculating gaze of a man weighing the value of a chess piece. She was a pawn. He had never cared for her. She knew that now. Of course not, Marcus said smoothly, his smile never reaching his eyes. He turned to Selah, his expression shifting to one of false sympathy. It seems fate has chosen a difficult path for you, little one. For the good of the pack, to honor the goddess and prevent bloodshed. You must go with him. Her world tilted. Betrayal. A bitter, metallic taste in her mouth. She looked desperately for Liam, but he was being held back by two of Marcus's guards, his face a mask of helpless fury. She was being given away. Sacrificed. With a single glance from her own alpha, her life was no longer her own. She was his, Corbin's. The alpha who looked at her not like a broken thing, but like a treasure he had just unearthed from the ashes. Her body moved on instinct, a puppet whose strings were pulled by the dictates of Aloysius. One step, then another, each one carried her away from the smoking remains of her past and deeper into a terrifying, unknown future. The space between them burned, the air thick with the weight of Corbin's stare. He walked beside her, not touching, but his presence was a physical shield against the whispers and shocked looks of both packs. His scent, a wall around her. They reached the ancient stone that marked the border between their lands. On one side lay the familiar woods of Sunstone, a place of dappled light and warm memories now tainted by betrayal. On the other, the Silver Moon territory. The forest here seemed different, darker. The trees were taller, ancient pines that clawed at the moonlit sky, their branches heavy with secrets. The air itself was colder, sharper. It smelled of damp earth, of winter's promise, and of him. Liam's desperate shout reached her. Selah! Her chest ached. She turned, her eyes finding his across the clearing. His face was a portrait of anguish. She gave him the smallest, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Don't fight, don't make this worse. It was a silent goodbye. He couldn't follow her across this line. He was Sunstone, and she was something else now. Without another word, Corbin led her across the border. The moment her feet touched Silver Moon soil, something inside her shifted. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up her spine from the soles of her feet. As the mark on her neck tingled, a phantom sensation, she realized the truth. The bond was real. It wasn't just his claim, it was something the land itself recognized. The forest seemed to hold its breath, watching her, accepting her. This was it, the point of no return. She was his now, in a land of savages, bound to a man who was a legend whispered in fear. She was a healer, a ghost, a sacrifice. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't imagine what came next. What does a monster do with a broken, silent mate? With every step he took deeper into his territory, the familiar world fell away behind her. The sounds of her old pack faded, replaced by the hoot of a hunting owl and the rustle of unseen things in the shadows. Shadows danced between them, and for the first time her wolf, so long dormant within her, pressed forward. Not in fear, but in curiosity. And she let it happen. Instead of warm, open spaces carved from the sunny rock of a hillside, this place was a fortress of dark timber and gray stone, built at the heart of the ancient, shadow-drenched forest. It felt primal, as if the buildings themselves had grown from the bones of the earth. With every step he took, Corbin led her deeper into the heart of his power, and the weight of hundreds of stares pressed down on her. They were looks of suspicion, of curiosity, of outright hostility. She was an outsider, a Sunstone wolf, the alpha's strange, broken prize. Before she could move, a tall she-wolf with eyes the same startling gold as Corbin's, but colder, blocked their path. Her scent was sharp, like frost on pine needles, and her smile was a thin, brittle thing. This had to be his sister, Seraphina. A growl rose in her throat, a silent, instinctive response that she quickly swallowed. Brother. Seraphina's voice was smooth, but held an edge like honed steel. You bring home a stray? Her eyes raked over Selah, dismissing her from head to toe. And a broken one at that. Sunstone must be desperate indeed. Selah's cheeks burned with shame. She wanted to shrink, to vanish into the ground. This was her new reality. A gilded cage filled with wolves who saw her as less than nothing. Truth be told, this was exactly what she had expected. It was the why that confused her. Why would an alpha as powerful as Corbin choose a mate who couldn't even speak his name? It made no sense. Because of that, she felt a new kind of fear. A fear not of violence, but of purpose. What did he want with her? Corbin didn't answer his sister. Instead, he simply moved to stand slightly in front of Selah, his broad back shielding her from Seraphina's venomous stare. The gesture was small, almost unnoticeable. But to Selah, it felt like a mountain shifting to protect a single, fragile flower. Without another word, he led her past his sister and toward the largest of the timber longhouses. He opened a heavy wooden door and guided her into a room. It was lavish, filled with rich furs and intricate carvings, but the air was cold, a beautiful prison. He finally turned to her, his golden eyes searching her face. "You are safe here," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. But as the door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone in the vast, cold room, she didn't know what scared her more, the wolves outside the door or the one who held the key. In the quiet that followed, Selah explored her new prison. The room was huge, with a massive stone hearth that was cold and dark, and a bed piled high with wolf and bear pelts that smelled of winter. And him. Her thoughts spun. The Luna of the Silver Moon Pack. It was a title that felt like a costume she was forced to wear. She walked to the window, a narrow slit in the stone wall, and looked out at the bustling settlement below. Every wolf moved with a purpose, a strength she had never seen in her own pack. They were a nation of warriors. And she... what was she? Later that day, the door opened again. It was Corbin. He carried a small, leather-bound book in one of his large hands. For a long moment, he just stood there, watching her. Under the weight of his stare, she felt like a captured bird. Then, he did something she never expected. He sat down in one of the heavy wooden chairs, opened the book, and looked at her. His expression wasn't demanding or angry. It was focused, patient. "My pack must be able to understand their Luna," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. He then held up his hand, awkwardly shaping his fingers into a symbol from the book. It was the sign for hello. Her breath caught. The book. It was an old text on the various hand signs of the regional packs. He was trying to learn her language. He was building a bridge across her silence. No one had ever done that. Not even Liam, who understood her signs through long years of practice, had ever tried to learn them formally. Because of that, a strange and unfamiliar emotion bloomed in her chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was confusion. Her body moved on instinct. She took a hesitant step closer, and then another. She reached out and gently corrected the position of his fingers, her touch light and fleeting against his calloused skin. As her skin touched his, a jolt. A spark of heat shot up her arm. Her heart skipped. She pulled her hand back as if burned. The moment their eyes locked, she saw a flicker of the same surprise in his golden depths. Between them, something cracked. A tiny fissure in the wall of fear she had built around her heart. He was a monster, a savage, a king in a land of shadow. And yet, he was trying to understand her. He was trying to hear her when she had no voice. This monster, her mate, was far more complicated than the stories had ever told. The next day, she was summoned to the Great Hall for the midday meal. The tension was a thick, suffocating blanket. She could feel the eyes of the pack on her as she sat beside Corbin at the head table, a place of honor that felt like a target. Her hands were tucked into her lap because she was determined not to give them anything, not a single sign, not a single tremor of fear. The hall was a cacophony of deep voices, clattering plates, and the tearing of meat. Louder, rougher, more alive than her own pack's hall had ever been. She felt a presence approach their table. A large, barrel-chested wolf with a sneer on his face, his scent thick with arrogance and cheap ale. He was one of Seraphina's inner circle. He stopped before Corbin, but his eyes were on her. "Alpha," he began, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "A question, if I may. How is our new Luna to give you counsel? How will she guide the pack in times of war? Will she wave her hands at our enemies?" A ripple of cruel laughter spread through the hall. Her cheeks burned. Hot, furious shame. Her fists clenched in her lap, nails digging into her palms. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. Before she could move, before a single thought could form, the atmosphere in the hall changed. It dropped. It became heavy, cold, and immensely dangerous. Without warning, Corbin was on his feet. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. A low, rumbling growl vibrated from his chest, a sound so full of primal authority that it silenced the entire hall in an instant. The air thickened. Time stood still. He took one slow, deliberate step toward the arrogant wolf. "Her name is Selah." Corbin's voice was dangerously quiet, a razor's edge in the sudden silence. "She is your Luna, and the next time you speak of her, you will do so with the respect she is owed." He leaned in, his shadow falling over the terrified wolf. "Or you will not speak at all." The threat was not a boast, it was a promise. As if pulled by a string, the large wolf dropped into a low bow, his head pressed to the floorboards. "Forgive me, Alpha." In the stillness that followed, Corbin turned. His golden eyes found hers. The raw, untamed power in his gaze was terrifying. It was a power that could command armies and break enemies. And in that moment, all of that terrifying, primal, absolute power, was focused on her. Not with anger, but with a fierce, unwavering protectiveness that stole the breath from her lungs. This was his, and he would burn the world down to protect it. In the weeks that followed, a fragile peace settled over her. A routine. Still, she felt like a ghost haunting the edges of a world that wasn't hers. She spent her days in the fortress library, a place so vast and ancient it seemed to breathe dust and secrets. She learned the history of the Silver Moon Pack, of their fierce loyalty, their harsh justice, and their deep connection to the moon. She learned of a world far older and far more dangerous than she had ever known. But then, one evening, the peace shattered. The warning horn blasted through the settlement, a deep, mournful sound that spoke of blood. Without thinking, her body moved on instinct, carrying her out of the library and towards the sounds of battle at the northern perimeter. The air was thick with the coppery tang of blood and the sharp, acrid scent of rogue rage. The fight was already over by the time she arrived. Several Silver Moon warriors were wounded, but one was down. His breathing, a shallow, ragged gasp. His packmates stood around him, their faces grim. "The wounds aren't deep," one of them said, his voice tight with frustration. "But he's burning up. It's like there's poison in the claws." Before she could move, Corbin was there, kneeling by the fallen wolf. His command was a sharp crack in the tense air. "Get her the healer's kit! Now!" Someone pressed the familiar leather satchel into her hands. Her hands, which had been trembling, suddenly grew steady. This, she knew. This was her language. The world narrowed. The shouts and the fear faded into a low hum. There was only the wolf before her, his life slipping away like sand through her fingers. She opened the kit, her fingers finding the familiar textures of herbs. Not just any herbs. She needed something to fight a poison, something to cool the blood. With every heartbeat, she worked. She crushed wild ginger root and yarrow into a paste, the motions as familiar to her as breathing. She didn't know if it would work, because this was no ordinary poison. She could feel a dark, unnatural magic clinging to the wounds. It felt deliberate, designed. As if the forest watched, holding its breath, she pressed the poultice onto the wound. The wolf's pained gasps began to even out. The violent heat radiating from his skin began to cool. In that moment, she wasn't a broken thing. She wasn't a silent prize. She was a healer. More importantly, she was their healer. Under the weight of his stare, she looked up and met Corbin's eyes. The raw pride she saw there was a more potent balm than any herb she possessed. The space between them burned, not with fear, but with a new, terrifying, and beautiful heat. Just like that, something inside her shifted. That small act of healing had earned her a sliver of something she hadn't realized she'd been starving for. Respect. The pack looked at her differently now. Not with warmth. Not yet. But with a grudging acknowledgement. She was not useless. Yet, the victory was hollow, because the mystery of the poison left a cold knot in her stomach. A few days later, a guard approached her while she was tending to the recovering warrior. "Luna," he said, his voice hesitant. "There is someone at the border. He says he is your brother." Her heart skipped. Liam! A wave of relief so powerful it almost brought her to her knees washed over her. After that, she was moving, running towards the border, her feet flying over the unfamiliar soil. She saw him standing just on the other side of the boundary stone, his face etched with worry. As if pulled by a string, she ran the last few feet, stopping just short of her own territory. "Selah," he breathed, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you all right? Has he—" She cut him off with a flurry of hand signs, her movements sharp and quick. "I am safe. He is fair." It was the simplest way to explain the complicated truth. "Fair?" Liam's laugh was a bitter, broken sound. "Selah, listen to me. I didn't come here just to see you." He lowered his voice, his eyes darting towards the trees. Whispered. "I've been digging into what happened to Mama and Papa." His words sent a chill down her spine. The official report said it was a simple rogue attack, a fire started by accident. But it's a lie. I found one of the old border guards, Selah. He was paid to let a rogue in that night, not just a rogue, a whole pack of them. It wasn't random. It was an assassination. Her thoughts spun. Assassination? No, it couldn't be. Her world tilted on its axis for the second time in as many weeks. But deep down, she knew the truth. It resonated with the dark feeling she'd had about Marcus, with the wrongness of it all. This was the missing piece, the key to the puzzle of her past. "I don't know who was behind it," Liam continued, his voice a raw whisper. "But they are powerful. They covered it up perfectly, which meant you can't trust anyone, Selah. Do you hear me? Not Marcus, not your pack, and especially not him." He nodded towards the Silver Moon Fortress. "An alpha like that doesn't get power by being kind. He gets it by taking what he wants." Between them, something cracked. The fragile trust she had started to build in this place, in him, fractured under the weight of her brother's words. That night, sleep was a battlefield. Her mind was a storm of Liam's words and the ghost of a memory that smelled of fire and sweet poison. The truth unraveled just beyond her reach, a thread she couldn't quite grasp. Come morning, she was exhausted, but a new cold resolve had settled in her bones. She would not be a pawn. She would not be a victim. She would find the truth. She spent the day in a feverish state, sketching on any scrap of parchment she could find. She drew the images that haunted her sleep, the flash of fire, the shape of a shadow that wasn't her father's, the strange, swirling pattern of the smoke. It was a language of nightmares, and she was desperate to translate it. She didn't know that she was being watched. As the sky darkened, Corbin entered her chambers without a sound. Before she could hide the drawings, he was there, his large frame blocking the light from the door. His golden eyes fell upon the scattered parchments. Her breath caught. She expected anger, an accusation. Instead, his expression was one of intense, unnerving focus. He knelt down, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a large man. He didn't touch her. He picked up one of the drawings, the one depicting the strange, sweet-smelling smoke. He traced the swirling pattern with a calloused finger. As the silence stretched, he finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. "This is not normal smoke." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "He knows." "There are old legends," he continued, his gaze still on the drawing. "Forbidden alchemy, ways to twist the mind, to create a rage that consumes the wolf from within. It was said to smell sweet." His eyes lifted to meet hers, and what she saw there changed everything. It wasn't pity. It wasn't suspicion. It was understanding. He saw the pieces of her broken past, not as the scribbles of a madwoman, but as clues, as evidence. In that moment, he ceased to be just her captor, her mate, her alpha. He became her ally, her only ally. He saw her, not the broken girl, but the survivor who held the key. The weight of his stare was no longer a burden, it was a promise that he would help her find the monster who had shattered her world. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that he would tear down the world to do it. In the quiet that followed their shared discovery, a new kind of silence settled between them. It wasn't the empty, fearful silence she was used to. Instead, it was a quiet filled with purpose. A silence that planned. A silence that hunted. For the first time, she and Corbin were not just alpha and claimed mate. They were partners. Two wolves on the scent of the same prey. And that changed everything. That night, she couldn't rest. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford when ghosts whispered in her ears. Her thoughts spun. Corbin had confirmed her deepest fears, that the sweet-smelling smoke was a poison, an ancient and forbidden alchemy. More importantly, he had mentioned an old text in the library that described it. He didn't know he was giving her a weapon, a key. Her body moved on instinct. As if pulled by a string, she slipped out of the fur-piled bed, her bare feet silent on the cold stone floor. The fortress was asleep. The only sounds were the sighing of the wind outside and the frantic, rabbit-fast beating of her own heart. The library was in the Alpha's private wing, a place forbidden to all but him and his most trusted counsel. To go there was a risk, a massive risk. Even so, she had to. Because of that, she pulled a dark cloak over her sleeping shift, the rough wool a comforting weight on her shoulders. Deep down, she knew the truth. This was no longer just about her past. It was about the present. A poison that had been used to murder her parents was now being used against Corbin's pack. The attacks weren't random acts of rogues. They were a coordinated assault. A war fought in the shadows. And she, the silent girl, was standing right in the middle of it. With every heartbeat, she crept through the dark, silent corridors of the fortress. The moonlight that sliced through the high windows was her only guide. Shadows danced between them, long and distorted like grasping fingers. Her heart pounded in her ears, a frantic drum against the silence. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of being caught, or the thought of what she might find in that book. By the time she reached the massive carved oak doors of the library, her hands were trembling. This was it. She was breaking her alpha's trust, sneaking into his private sanctum. But then, another thought pushed its way through the fear. Maybe I'm not breaking his trust. Maybe I'm proving I'm worthy of it. Before she could move, she took a steadying breath and pushed the heavy door open. The library smelled of old paper, leather, and dust, a scent she normally loved, but tonight it felt heavy, suffocating, a tomb of forgotten words. Her instinct surged. She had to be fast. She moved through the towering shelves, her fingers ghosting over the ancient spines of the books. She was looking for anything on alchemy, on poisons, on the old, forbidden magic. Her heart pounded. It felt like hours. It could only have been minutes. And then, she saw it. A small, unassuming book bound in dark, cracked leather, tucked away on a low shelf as if someone had tried to hide it. No title on the spine. As if summoned, her hand reached for it. The leather was cold, almost unnaturally so. She opened it. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the drawings, they were just like hers. Swirls of smoke, detailed depictions of herbs she recognized, and notes on a poison that promised a rage that consumes the soul. A silent growl of vindication rose in her throat. It was real, all of it. Without warning, a floorboard creaked behind her. Her blood ran cold. She snapped the book shut, her body freezing, her heart hammering against her ribs. Caught! It's over! She slowly turned, expecting to see Corbin, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. But it wasn't him. It was Seraphina. Corbin's sister stood there, a single candle in her hand, her golden eyes narrowed in suspicion. The flickering light cast long, dancing shadows on her face, making her look like a predator. The tension broke. There was nowhere to run. Looking for a bedtime story, little stray? Seraphina's voice was a silken threat. She took a step closer, her eyes flicking down to the book clutched in Selah's hands. Or something more interesting? Selah's mind raced. She could try to hide it, to lie. But what was the point? Her actions spoke for themselves. Instead, she held her ground, meeting Seraphina's cold gaze without flinching. Seraphina's lips curved into a cruel smile. So, the little mouse has teeth after all. But then her expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. Not triumph, but a sharp, calculating curiosity. That wolf who died from the poisoned claws, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He was one of mine, loyal to me above all others, and I too have wondered why our enemies would use a poison so theatrical. Between them, something cracked. The clear line between friend and enemy blurred into a murky gray. Selah didn't know if she could trust this she-wolf, this creature of ambition and ice. But as Seraphina's gaze met hers, an unspoken question hung in the air. What do you know? Before either could speak, the warning horn blasted through the night again. A different sound this time. Not the call to battle, but a frantic, desperate summons to the Alpha's hall. A sound that meant something was terribly wrong inside the fortress itself. Without another word, Seraphina turned and swept from the library, the urgency of the horn overriding their tense standoff. Selah clutched the cold leather of the book to her chest and followed. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Not again. Please, not again. They burst into the great hall to a scene of controlled chaos. Several pack members were gathered around one of the long tables, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. And in the center of the circle on the floor was a young she-wolf, convulsing, her body racked with violent tremors, a white foam frothing at her lips. Her eyes were wide with a terror that saw nothing. She just collapsed, someone shouted. She drank from the communal wineskin and then... Selah pushed through the crowd. She felt it before she saw it. The scent, faint, almost unnoticeable beneath the smell of wine and roasting meat. But it was there, cloying, sickly, sweet, the poison. It wasn't just the rogues. It wasn't just a weapon for the battlefield. It was here, inside their walls, inside their home. This was an act of assassination, an attempt on someone's life right under the Alpha's nose. As the truth unraveled, a cold, terrifying certainty washed over her. The attack on her friend back in the clearing, the one Marcus had witnessed. It wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was a test, a trial run. Her thoughts spun. Corbin was at the young wolf's side, his hands hovering over her, his face a mask of helpless fury. He was the Alpha, the most powerful wolf in the territory, and yet he was powerless against this insidious, invisible enemy. As the silence roared in her ears, Selah knew. This was it, the point of no return. Her personal quest for answers about her past had just collided with a clear and present danger to her new pack, to her mate. Her body moved, not with instinct, but with a cold, hard purpose she had never felt before. She knelt beside Corbin, the forbidden book a heavy weight in her hands. She opened it to the page with the drawing of the swirling smoke. Her hand trembled, not with fear but with a terrible resolve. She met Corbin's furious, questioning gaze, and she pointed. She pointed at the drawing and then at the convulsing she-wolf on the floor. Her silent accusation hung in the air, more powerful than any spoken word. It's here, and I know what it is. In the quiet that followed, a plan began to form. A desperate, fragile thing made of old books, fragmented memories, and a new, terrifying alliance with Seraphina. But then, a raven arrived, a message that made the blood run cold in her veins. Alpha Marcus was coming for a diplomatic visit to discuss the rogue threat and strengthen their alliance in the wake of the recent attack. It was a lie. Selah felt it in her bones. The predator was walking willingly into their den, and she didn't know why. He arrived the next day, all smooth smiles and false concern. He brought gifts: a bottle of aged whiskey for Corbin, a small, intricately carved wooden wolf for her, a peace offering. Yet, when his fingers brushed hers as he handed her the gift, her skin crawled. Corbin, on the other hand, greeted him as an old ally. He was tense, his anger over the poisoning still a living thing, but he was also a powerful alpha who understood the need for diplomacy. That night, the three of them, Selah, Corbin, and Marcus, dined together in Corbin's private chambers. The air was thick with unspoken words. Marcus spoke of unity, of rooting out the traitors who had allowed the poison into their halls. All the while, his eyes, dark and depthless, watched her. "Your Luna is a remarkable creature, Corbin," Marcus said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "So observant, so quiet. One wonders what she must think, seeing all she has seen." Corbin's arm rested on the back of her chair, a warm, solid weight. His scent was her only anchor in the suffocating sea of tension. "Her thoughts are her own." Corbin's voice was a low warning. "But her safety is mine." Because of that, Marcus's smile widened. It didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. We must all protect what is ours." As the night wore on, she noticed a change in Corbin. His movements grew subtly slower. A flicker of confusion would cross his face. There and gone in an instant. It was almost unnoticeable. But she, who had learned to read the smallest shifts in the air, she saw it. After that, her breath caught. She looked at the whiskey glass in Corbin's hand, then at Marcus's smiling face. And she understood. The poison wasn't just for assassins. It was in her mate's cup. And the monster who put it there was sitting right across from them. What followed was a slow-motion nightmare. Corbin wasn't convulsing like the she-wolf in the hall. This was different. Slower, more insidious. A poison for the mind, not the body. By the time Marcus left the next morning, leaving behind his gifts and empty promises, the damage was done. Corbin was altered. The warmth in his eyes, gone, replaced by a guarded suspicion. The easy way he moved was now tight, coiled, as if expecting an attack from any direction. And his suspicion, she realized with a dawning horror, was pointed at her. "Where were you last night?" he asked, his voice flat. He had found her in the library, her drawings of the smoke patterns spread across the table. Her hands moved to explain, "I couldn't sleep. I was studying the texts." "Studying," he repeated, the word a strange, ugly shape in his mouth. He picked up one of her drawings. His knuckles were white. "Or were you planning? This obsession you have, the fire, the smoke, it started the moment you arrived, just before the attacks on my pack began." Her heart skipped. No. Corbin, no. Her hands flew, trying to make him understand, trying to remind him of their alliance, of his promise. "Your brother appears at my border with tales of conspiracy," he continued, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, his thoughts poisoned and twisting the truth. "You are found sneaking in my private library, and a she-wolf is poisoned, an act that conveniently makes you look like a hero when you find the clue in your little book." How perfect. The accusation was a physical blow. It stole the air from her lungs. This was her worst fear made real. Not just that he wouldn't believe her, but that he would see her as the curse everyone else did. A harbinger of chaos. As if pulled by a string, her own guilt, her deep-seated belief that she was a broken thing that ruined everything, rose up to choke her. "Tell me the truth, Selah," he snarled, his eyes a furious, confused gold. He grabbed her arm, his grip just shy of painful. "Are you a spy?" Her world tilted. He wasn't just her mate, her alpha, her protector. He was her judge, her jury. And in his poison-clouded eyes, she was already guilty. She didn't know where she was going, she just ran. From the library, from the accusation in his eyes, from the monstrous lie that was now his truth. His words echoed in her mind, each one a fresh wound. Spy. Obsession. How perfect. Her chest ached with a pain so sharp it felt like her heart was tearing in two. She finally collapsed in her own chambers, the lavish room now feeling like the coldest, most desolate cell. In the quiet that followed, she curled up on the furs that still held his scent, a cruel reminder of the trust they had lost. She looked at her own reflection in a polished silver water basin, the same haunted eyes, the same scarred throat. Elder Maeve's words came back to her. "You have a touch for broken things." The irony was a bitter pill. She could heal the wounds of others, but she couldn't heal this. She couldn't heal him. More importantly, she couldn't heal herself. Deep down, she knew the truth she had tried to run from her whole life. Maybe they were all right. Maybe she was a curse. Chaos had followed her from the moment she was born. Her parents died. Her pack lived in fear of her. And now, the one person who had looked at her and seen something more than a broken toy, he too was lost to the darkness she carried with her. Her thoughts spun. She had tried so hard. She had learned to be a ghost, to take up no space, to make no sound. But the darkness had found her anyway. Or maybe she had brought it with her. As the silence roared in her ears, she didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a hollow, echoing void where hope used to be. She pulled the furs tighter around her, but they offered no warmth. There was no warmth left. Marcus had won. He had not only poisoned her mate's body, he had poisoned his soul. He had turned her greatest ally into her accuser, and validated her deepest, most terrifying fear. Her body felt heavy, her bones made of lead. The fight was gone. In the stillness that followed, she closed her eyes. She was just a silent girl in a cold room, completely and utterly alone, and for the first time she didn't see a way out. In the stillness that followed her surrender, a soft knock echoed on her chamber door. Selah didn't move. She didn't have the strength. Let them come. Let them do what they will. The door creaked open anyway. As if summoned, a figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the dim hallway light. It wasn't Corbin. It was Seraphina. Her heart didn't even have the energy to skip a beat. She just watched as the she-wolf she'd considered an enemy approached the bed. Seraphina's face was unreadable in the gloom, her usual sharp arrogance softened by something else. Something uncertain. Whispered. "He is a fool." Seraphina's voice was a low whisper in the dark. "My brother. He has the strength of 10 alphas, but the pride of 100. He cannot see a snake in his own den if it's wearing a friendly face." Selah remained silent, a statue carved from despair. From there, Seraphina took another step closer. She held out her hand. In her palm, a small corked glass vial containing a clear liquid. "Marcus is a careless man. He prides himself on his intellect, but he is arrogant. He dropped this in the guest chambers before he left." Selah's eyes focused on the vial. An antidote. "My brother is a fool," Seraphina repeated, her voice harder now, laced with a fury that was a mirror of Selah's own buried rage. "But he is not a monster, and he is my alpha." She placed the vial on the bedside table. "That man, on the other hand, he is something else entirely." Between them, something cracked. Not a bond, not yet, but an understanding, an alliance forged in the crucible of a common enemy. The ice around Selah's heart began to thaw, not with warmth, but with the cold fire of renewed purpose. Because of that, Seraphina, the she-wolf of ice and ambition, had just handed her a weapon. She had just given her back her hope. As the wind shifted outside, carrying the lonely sound of a wolf's howl, Selah slowly, deliberately pushed herself up. Her bones no longer felt like lead. They felt like steel. She looked at Serafina, the predator who had become an ally, and for the first time Selah gave her a single sharp nod. "We have work to do." Her body moved on instinct, carrying her through the silent fortress and back to the Alpha's private wing. She found Corbin in the library. He was slumped in a chair by the cold hearth, staring into the embers as if they held the answers to the universe. His scent was muted, soured by the poison in his veins. The air thickened with his pain and confusion. He looked up as she entered, his golden eyes cloudy with suspicion. "Come to gloat?" he rasped, his voice a shadow of its former power. Instead, she walked directly to him. She held out the vial. Her hand was steady, her gaze unwavering. He stared at the antidote, then back at her, his poisoned mind warring with the pull of their bond. "Trust me," her eyes pleaded. "One more time." As the silence stretched, he slowly, hesitantly, took the vial from her. His fingers brushed against hers, and even through the haze of the poison, a faint spark ignited between them. He uncorked it. He drank. What followed was a storm. He choked, a low growl rising in his throat as his body fought the cure. His muscles seized. He fell to his knees, his head bowed in agony. Selah knelt before him, her hands hovering, wanting to help but knowing this was a war he had to win himself. Moments later, an eternity, he let out a shuddering breath. The sickness began to recede from his scent. Slowly, he lifted his head. The cloudiness in his eyes was gone. What remained was a clear, horrifying shame. "Selah." Her name was a broken whisper. "What I said, She placed a finger on his lips, shaking her head. There was no time for apologies. There was only time for the truth. She pulled him to the table, to her scattered drawings, to the forbidden book. Her hands flew, explaining everything. The poison, the book, her memories, Serafina's help, Marcus. It all came pouring out in a silent, frantic torrent. He listened, his expression shifting from shame to a cold, lethal fury. By the time she was done, the bond between them was no longer a fragile thread. It was a chain of forged steel, tempered in betrayal and fire. They had their enemy, and now they had a plan. The next day, they sent a message to Marcus, an invitation to a formal council meeting at the neutral ground, to finalize the alliance and address the rogue threat once and for all. It was a trap, and they knew he knew it. But an alpha could not refuse such a formal summons without showing weakness. So he would come. He would walk right into their snare, confident in his own. The journey to the border felt different this time. Before, she had been a captive, a victim being led to her fate. But now, she rode beside Corbin, not behind him. She was a partner, a warrior, a Luna. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, the leaves on the trees like drops of fire. A perfect day for a war. As they rode, Corbin finally spoke. "Liam was right to warn you, to not trust me." She looked at him, surprised. She signed, her hands graceful in the moving air. "You were not yourself." "It does not matter," he said, his voice a low rumble of self-loathing. "The poison did not create the suspicion, Selah. It only gave it a voice. My pack's prejudice, my own pride, I let it blind me. I hurt you." His jaw clenched. It will not happen again. His vow hung in the air between them, more binding than any oath sworn before a council. It was a promise from a man, not just an alpha. It was the final piece of the bridge across her silence. As they approached the clearing where the mating hunt had taken place, the place where her world had both ended and begun, she felt her wolf stir. Her instincts surged. Shadows danced between them as the sun began to dip below the horizon. They were walking into the heart of the danger to face the monster who had haunted her entire life. She was terrified. Yet, for the first time, She was not alone. She looked at the powerful alpha beside her, at her mate, and a fierce, possessive growl rose in her own throat. Let him come. While the forest held its breath, she prepared for the final confrontation. The clearing was just as she remembered it, soaked in the blood-orange light of the setting sun. But this time she was not a frightened girl being led to a hunt. She was a queen arriving for a reckoning. Marcus and his Sunstone honor guard were already there, arranged around the great council fire. His face was a perfect mask of calm diplomacy. A liar. A murderer. Her wolf pressed forward, a silent snarl in her soul. The air thickened with tension. From there, Marcus began to speak. He spoke of trust, of alliance, of the dark times they faced. He spoke of needing to root out the treachery that had poisoned their people. All the while, his dark eyes kept flicking to Corbin, a predator sizing up his wounded rival. Selah stood beside her mate, a silent statue, her hands clenched at her sides. She was the bait, and she was ready. Without warning, Marcus raised a hand. "It is a tragedy that we have been infiltrated by such darkness," he said, his voice ringing with false sorrow. "A darkness that has touched even my oldest friend Corbin. A darkness, I fear, that he has allowed to fester." On that cue, the world exploded. It wasn't just rogues this time. From the shadows of the forest emerged a dozen of Marcus's own warriors, their eyes glowing with the same mindless, poisoned rage. It was a coup, a purge. Half charged Corbin's guards, while the other half, to her horror, charged her own brother, Liam, and the Sunstone guard loyal to him. Corbin moved, a silver blur of fury, placing himself in front of her. But he was still weak, still recovering from the poison. He fought with the strength of an alpha, but he was outnumbered. She saw him take a deep cut to his side, saw him stagger, and then Marcus was there, a wicked-looking silver dagger in his hand, moving towards Corbin's exposed back. A shame, Marcus sighed. He was once a great alpha. In that moment, as if fate demanded it, everything came rushing back. Fire, roaring, the sweet smell of poison, her mother's desperate eyes, her father's fall, and Marcus, smiling, lit by the flames he had set. The scream that had been trapped in her throat for 10 years, the one that had died with her parents, clawed its way out. But it was not a scream of terror. It was a sound of pure, untamed power. A sonic wave, a physical force that erupted from her lips, tearing through the clearing. It was the sound of a soul reclaiming its voice. The poisoned wolves faltered, clutching their heads. The air itself seemed to shatter. Marcus froze, the dagger falling from his numb fingers, his face a mask of shocked disbelief. Her voice, her greatest wound, had just become her ultimate weapon. The world seemed to hold its breath. The poisoned warriors were on their knees, disoriented, the alchemical rage in their eyes replaced by a dazed confusion. The spell was broken, and just like that, the tide of the battle turned. Corbin's loyal guards, along with a furious and vengeful Liam, moved to subdue Marcus and his remaining traitors. But Selah only had eyes for Corbin. He was leaning heavily against a great oak tree, his hand pressed to the bleeding wound in his side. His golden eyes were wide, not with pain but with a look of pure, unadulterated awe. He was staring at her as if he had never truly seen her before, as if she were the moon itself, descended to the forest floor. Her body moved on instinct, her legs carrying her across the torn-up earth to his side. Her hands, no longer trembling, went to his wound. She pressed down, her healer's touch already working to stem the flow of blood. The space between them burned, no longer with just the heat of the bond, but with the raw, vibrating energy of what had just happened. Selah. He breathed her name. It was a prayer, a question, a statement of wonder. She met his gaze, and she smiled. A real smile, one that reached her eyes and banished the last of the shadows. There were no words, because in that moment, none were needed. He had seen the truth of her, the power she held, the strength forged in her silence. Between them, something cracked and fell away, the last vestiges of the broken girl and the monstrous alpha. What remained was just a man and a woman, a wolf and his mate. As the sounds of the final skirmishes faded, her world narrowed to the beat of his heart under her palm, steady and strong. The fighting was over. The villain was vanquished. The war for their future had been won. Still, as she looked into the golden eyes of her mate, she knew the journey to heal the wounds left behind was just beginning. Come morning 2 years later, the world was a different place. The Silver Moon and Sunstone packs were no more. In their place stood the new Ashen River Pack, a unified nation forged in fire and truth, led by Alpha Corbin and his Luna, Selah. The great hall of the Silver Moon Fortress, once a place of cold stone and hostile stares, was now filled with the laughter of children from both old packs, their scents mingling in the warm, sunlit air. Selah stood on the overlook, the same cliff where she had once felt like a terrified captive. Now, it felt like home. The wind carried the scent of pine and the distant smell of her pack, a scent of safety and belonging. Her voice, once a lost and forgotten thing, was now her favorite instrument. She used it to teach the young healers, to mediate disputes with a calm wisdom that rivaled the elders, and to whisper stories to her mate under the moonlight. The scar on her throat was still there, a pale silver reminder of the fire, but it was no longer a mark of shame. It was a symbol of her journey, a testament to the fact that sometimes our deepest wounds are simply a roadmap to our greatest strengths. She felt his presence before she heard him. Corbin came to stand behind her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his warmth a familiar comfort. He no longer ruled through fear, but through a fierce, respected love for his people, for his family. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured, his voice a low, happy rumble against her ear. She leaned back into him, her heart full. In the quiet that followed, she thought of the silent girl who had arrived here, so lost and broken. She thought of the journey, the pain, the terror, and the incredible, impossible love that had grown from the ashes. As if the world had finally settled into perfect alignment, she turned her head and met his loving, golden gaze. Her voice was clear and steady, a melody on the wind. "I was just thinking," she said, her smile bright and free, "that I'm finally home." Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So, why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again.